Welcome back. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment where you're listening from. It helps YouTube know you want more videos like this. All right, ready? Turn off the lights and listen closely. I've been a long-haul trucker for 17 years now, driving routes that take me from coast to coast through every state in the continental U.S. I've seen just about everything you can see from behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler. Beautiful sunrises over the Rockies, devastating accidents, weird roadside attractions, and people doing things in their cars they definitely shouldn't be doing. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what I encountered on Interstate 40 in the Texas Panhandle in the winter of 2019. It was late February, around 2 a.m., and I was hauling a load of electronics from Los Angeles to Memphis. I had been driving for about 8 hours and was looking for a place to pull over and get some rest. The problem was, this particular stretch of I-40 is desolate as hell. Nothing but flat, empty land on both sides of the highway, with truck stops and rest areas few and far between. I was listening to a podcast, something about true crime, when I saw the car on the side of the road. It was a sedan, maybe a Honda or a Toyota, pulled onto the shoulder with its hazard lights blinking. The driver's side door was open, and I could see someone standing next to it waving their arms. My first instinct was to keep driving. I know that sounds callous, but you have to understand there are scams out there, people who pretend to be stranded, and when a good Samaritan stops to help, they get robbed, or worse. It happens more often than you'd think. But as I got closer, I could see it was a woman, and she looked genuinely distressed. She was wearing what looked like a business suit, and she wasn't dressed for the cold. The temperature that night was probably in the low 30s, and the wind was brutal. I slowed down and pulled my rig onto the shoulder about 50 feet past her car. I grabbed my flashlight and my tire iron, I wasn't stupid, and climbed down from the cab. "You okay?" I called out as I approached. She turned to face me, and even from a distance I could see she'd been crying. Her mascara was streaked down her face, and she was shaking, though whether from cold or fear I couldn't tell. "Thank God," she said, her voice hoarse. "Please, you have to help me. Something's wrong. Something's really wrong." "What happened? Car trouble?" She shook her head violently. "No, I mean, yes, but that's not... You have to listen to me. We need to leave, right now. Both of us need to get off this highway." I stopped walking, suddenly very aware that this might be exactly the kind of setup I'd been worried about. "Ma'am, I'm happy to help, but you need to calm down and tell me what's going on." "There's something on this highway. Something that's not right. I've been driving for hours and I can't find an exit. Every time I think I'm getting close to a town, the signs change. The mile markers go backward. It's like the highway won't let me leave." Great. I'd stopped to help someone who was either on drugs or having a mental breakdown. "Okay," I said slowly. "How long have you been driving?" "Since 6 p.m. I left Amarillo heading east. It should have taken me an hour to get to the Oklahoma border, maybe a little more. But I've been driving for 8 hours and I'm still in Texas. The same stretch of Texas, over and over." I glanced at my watch. It was 2:17 a.m. If she had left Amarillo at 6 p.m., she should have been well into Oklahoma by now, probably close to Oklahoma City. "Where are you trying to get to?" "Little Rock. I have a meeting in the morning. I should have stopped for the night, but I thought I could make it. And now..." She trailed off, looking around at the empty highway with an expression of pure dread. I was about to suggest she was just tired and confused, that she'd probably gotten on the wrong highway or missed some exits, when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There was a mile marker behind her car, mile 89. I'd passed mile 89 about 40 minutes ago before I even saw this woman's car, which meant either I'd somehow driven in a circle or something was very, very wrong. What mile marker did you pass last? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. 89. I've passed mile 89 7 times tonight. I pulled out my phone to check my GPS. No signal. Not unusual in remote areas, but my GPS should show my location based on satellite. Instead, the screen showed nothing but a gray void with a small blue dot in the center. No roads, no landmarks, nothing. Get in your car and follow me, I said. We're leaving, now. She didn't argue. She practically dove into her car and started the engine. I jogged back to my truck, climbed in, and pulled back onto the highway. In my side mirror, I could see her headlights as she followed close behind. I pushed my rig up to 70 miles per hour, scanning for any sign of an exit or a town. The road stretched out ahead of me, straight and empty, with nothing but darkness on either side. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 20. No exits, no towns, no other vehicles. And then I saw it. Mile marker 89. I'd just driven past mile marker 89 again. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. This wasn't possible. I'd been driving east in a straight line for 20 minutes. I should have covered at least 20 miles. But somehow I was back at the same mile marker. The woman's voice crackled over my CB radio. I'd given her my channel before we left. Do you see it? Do you see the mile marker? Yeah, I see it. What do we do? I didn't have an answer. I kept driving, but now I was paying closer attention to everything. The highway, the landscape, the sky. And that's when I noticed that the stars were wrong. I'm not an astronomer, but I know the basics. I know what the Big Dipper looks like, what Orion looks like. The constellations I was seeing weren't right. They were familiar, but arranged incorrectly, like someone had taken the night sky and scrambled it. We're not in Texas anymore, I said into the CB, more to myself than to her. What? The stars. Look at the stars. They're wrong. There was a long pause. Then, oh God, what is this? I was about to respond when I saw something ahead. Lights. Not street lights or building lights, but something else. A faint pulsing glow on the horizon, like heat lightning, but more deliberate. As we got closer, the glow resolved into shapes. Structures. Buildings, maybe, but their outlines were strange. Angular in ways that hurt to look at. And standing in the middle of the highway, directly in our path, was a figure. It was tall, impossibly tall, maybe 12 feet high. Its proportions were all wrong. Too thin, limbs too long, head too small. And it was completely motionless, just standing there in the center of the road. I had two choices: swerve around it or stop. I chose to swerve. As I pulled into the left lane, the figure turned its head to watch me pass. I couldn't make out any features, just a pale, featureless oval where its face should be. In my mirror, I saw the woman's car swerve as well, following my lead. The moment we passed the figure, everything changed. The darkness lifted, the stars snapped back into their correct positions, and ahead of me I could see lights, real lights, a truck stop, with other vehicles parked in the lot, brightly lit and welcoming. I pulled into the parking lot and stopped, my heart hammering. The woman pulled in next to me and practically fell out of her car. What the hell was that? What the hell was that thing? I didn't answer because I didn't have an answer. We went into the truck stop diner together, and the first thing I did was ask the clerk where we were. Exit 112, just outside of Shamrock, Texas, he said, looking at us like we were crazy. Exit 112. We'd somehow jumped from mile marker 89 to exit 112, skipping over 20 miles in an instant.
The woman and I sat in the truck stop diner until sunrise, drinking coffee and not talking about what had happened. What could we say? That we'd driven through some kind of pocket dimension? That we'd encountered something on that highway that shouldn't exist? When the sun came up, she thanked me, got in her car, and drove away. I never saw her again. I don't even know her name. I still drive I-40, but I never drive that stretch late at night anymore. And when I pass mile marker 89, I always check my mirrors, just to make sure nothing's following me. Because I think whatever was out there that night is still there, waiting for the next driver who finds themselves on the wrong version of the highway, in the wrong version of Texas, under the wrong stars.
This happened to my girlfriend, Rachel, about 6 years ago. She was driving home from her parents' house in rural Pennsylvania, taking a route she'd driven dozens of times before. It was a Sunday evening in October, around 7 p.m., and she'd left a little later than she'd planned. The drive normally took about 2 hours, mostly on back roads and state highways. Rachel knew the route well, could practically drive it with her eyes closed. Turn left at the old church, right at the abandoned gas station, straight through the four-way stop, and so on. About an hour into the drive, as the sun was setting, she realized she needed gas. She'd meant to fill up before leaving her parents' place, but forgot. Now she was down to about a quarter tank, and she knew there was a small gas station coming up in a few miles. Except, when she got to where the gas station should have been, it wasn't there. Not closed, not abandoned, just gone. In its place was an empty field, as if the gas station had never existed. Rachel figured she must have been thinking of a different gas station, maybe one further down the road, so she kept driving, watching her fuel gauge drop lower and lower. 10 minutes later, she passed the old church, the one that was supposed to be at the beginning of her route, not an hour into it. She was going in circles somehow, but that didn't make sense. The road had been straight. She hadn't made any turns. She pulled over to check her phone's GPS, but like so many stories like this, she had no signal. The GPS showed her as a blue dot on a gray void, with no roads or landmarks visible. That's when she saw the other car. It was pulled over on the opposite side of the road, a station wagon that looked like it was from the 1970s, wood paneling on the sides, the whole 9 yards. And standing next to it was a family. A mother, a father, and 2 kids, a boy and a girl, both probably under 10 years old. They were all dressed in clothing from decades ago. The mother in a long dress and cardigan, the father in slacks and a button-up shirt, the kids in outfits that looked like they came from a Sears catalog from 1975. And they were all staring at Rachel's car. Not just looking, staring, with expressions that Rachel described as hungry. She didn't stop. She put her car in gear and drove, faster than she should have on that narrow road. In her rearview mirror, she saw the family get back into their station wagon, and then they started following her. Rachel sped up. The station wagon sped up. She took a sharp turn onto a side road she didn't recognize. The station wagon followed. For 20 minutes, she drove through unfamiliar territory, the station wagon always behind her, never getting closer, but never falling back either. And the fuel gauge kept dropping. She was almost on empty now. Then suddenly, she saw lights ahead. Real lights, street lights and building lights, a town. She didn't recognize it, didn't know what town it was, but she didn't care. She just needed to be around other people. She pulled onto what looked like a main street, and immediately everything felt wrong. The buildings were old. Not just old like historic old, but old like they'd been abandoned for decades. The streetlights flickered and buzzed, and there were no other cars,
no pedestrians, no signs of life.
But the worst part was the silence. Complete, absolute silence. No wind, no distant traffic, no ambient noise at all. Just dead quiet. The station wagon pulled up behind her and stopped. Rachel's gas light had been on for miles. She knew she was running on fumes. She had to make a decision. She saw what looked like a diner, its neon sign flickering but still partially lit. Eats in red letters, with the S burned out. She got out of her car, locked it, and ran to the diner. The door was unlocked, and she pushed inside. The interior looked frozen in time. A long counter with swivel stools, red vinyl booths, a jukebox on the corner. Everything covered in a thick layer of dust. But there was someone behind the counter. A man, probably in his 50s, wearing a stained white apron and a paper hat. He was cleaning a glass with a rag, moving in slow, deliberate circles. "We're closed," he said without looking up. "Please, I need help. My car's almost out of gas. I'm lost. I don't know where I am." "Can't help you." "Please, there's a family following me. I think they want to hurt me." The man finally looked up, and Rachel saw that his eyes were completely black. Not dark brown, or dilated. Black, like a doll's eyes. "The family in the station wagon?" he asked. "Yes. They've been driving this road for a long time. Since 1976. They ran out of gas, just like you're about to. They wandered into town looking for help, and they never left." "What are you talking about?" "This place," he gestured around the diner. "It's not really here. Not in the way you think. It's a dead zone. A place where people end up when they get lost on certain roads at certain times. The family's been here for decades. So have I. So have a lot of others." "That's insane." "Is it? Then explain how you got here. Explain why your GPS doesn't work. Explain why you've been driving in circles." Rachel didn't have an explanation. "You have a choice," he said. "You can stay here, with us, or you can try to leave. But your car is almost out of gas, and if you run out while you're still on these roads, you'll end up right back here. And next time, you won't have a choice." Rachel backed toward the door. "I'm leaving. Good luck." She ran back to her car. The station wagon was still there, parked behind her, but the family was nowhere to be seen. Rachel started her car. The engine coughed, but caught, and she drove. She drove as fast as she dared, the fuel gauge resting on E, expecting the engine to die at any moment. She passed the diner, past more abandoned buildings, and then suddenly she was out of the town, back on a dark road. She kept driving, praying, begging the car to keep going just a little further. And then she saw it. A real town, with real lights and real people and a real gas station. She pulled into the gas station, and the moment she stopped, the engine died. She'd made it on fumes. The attendant, a teenage kid who looked blessedly normal, came out to help her. "Where am I?" Rachel asked. Milton, Pennsylvania. Milton was 40 miles off her route, in the opposite direction from where she'd been heading. She filled up her tank, bought a coffee to steady her nerves, and drove home using a different route, a main highway with plenty of traffic and lights and civilization. She's never taken that back road again. And when I asked her if she thought what happened was real, or if maybe she had fallen asleep at the wheel and dreamed the whole thing, she showed me something. A business card, yellowed with age, with grease stains on the edges. It said, Eddie's Diner, with an address in a town that doesn't exist, and a phone number that, when I called it, just played a disconnected tone. She had found it in her pocket when she got home. She has no memory of taking it, but it was there. Proof that she had been somewhere, had encountered something that shouldn't have been possible. She keeps it in a drawer now. Says she never wants to look at it, but can't bring herself to throw it away. I thought about going to look for that town, for that diner, for that stretch of road where reality breaks down. But I haven't. And I don't think I ever will. Because I don't want to find out what happens if I run out of gas.
My uncle Greg drove for Uber for 3 years, mainly doing night shifts because the money was better. He'd pick up people leading bars, airport runs, late-night workers heading home. He'd seen just about every kind of passenger you can imagine. Drunks, partiers, business travelers, people sneaking out to meet their mistresses, you name it. But in January of 2021, he picked up a fare that made him quit driving for Uber permanently. It was around 3 a.m. on a Thursday morning, and Greg was working the downtown area of Kansas City. He just dropped off a passenger at a hotel and was about to call it a night when he got a ping for a pickup. The location was odd, a residential street in a neighborhood that was nice, but not the kind of place people usually called Ubers from at 3 a.m. The passenger's name was listed as Michael. Greg accepted the ride and drove to the address. It was a normal-looking house, 2-story colonial, well-maintained, with a car in the driveway and a couple of lights on inside. A man came out of the house as Greg pulled up. He looked normal enough, mid-30s, wearing jeans and a jacket, carrying a small backpack. He got in the back seat. "Hey, how's it going?" Greg said. "Fine." His voice was flat, emotionless. Greg pulled up the destination on his app. It was an address on the outskirts of the city, about a 30-minute drive. They drove in silence for the first 10 minutes. Greg tried to make conversation, asked about the weather, about the late hour, but the passenger gave only one-word answers. Then, as they were merging onto the highway, the passenger spoke. "Do you believe in ghosts?" Greg was taken aback. I don't know. Never really thought about it." "You should. They're real." "Okay," Greg said, not sure how to respond. "I died 3 years ago," the passenger continued in that same flat voice. "Car accident, on this highway. Head-on collision. I died instantly." Greg glanced in the rearview mirror. The passenger was staring out the window, his face expressionless. That's rough, man. I'm sorry." "You don't understand. I'm not telling you about my death. I'm telling you that I died. Past tense. I'm dead." A chill ran down Greg's spine. "What are you talking about?" "I'm a ghost. I died, but I'm still here. I call an Uber every night. Trying to get home, but I never make it. I always end up back where I started." Greg's hands tightened on the wheel. This guy was either messing with him or having some kind of mental breakdown. Look, buddy, I don't know what you're trying to pull over. What? Pull over. Now. There was something in the man's voice, a note of urgency or maybe warning that made Greg comply. He pulled onto the shoulder and put the car in park. What's going on? The passenger pointed ahead at the highway. In about 30 seconds, a semi-truck is going to cross the median and hit a car head-on. Right there. He pointed at a specific spot on the road. The car will spin out, hit the guardrail, and the driver will die instantly. I know because it's happened before. It happens every night. That's insane. Watch. Greg watched, his heart pounding. 30 seconds passed, and then, exactly as the passenger had described, a semi-truck swerved across the median, its headlights cutting through the darkness. It smashed into a sedan that had been driving in the opposite direction. The sound was deafening, metal crunching, glass shattering. The sedan spun out and slammed into the guardrail. Greg grabbed his phone to call 911, but the passenger put a hand on his shoulder. Don't. They're already dead. And if you call, you'll be here for hours. You'll give a statement to the police, and then tomorrow night, it'll happen again. And the night after that. It always happens. What the hell is going on? The passenger looked at Greg, and for the first time his expression changed. He looked sad, defeated. I don't know. I think I'm trapped in some kind of loop. Every night I try to get home. Every night I take this highway, and every night I see that accident. Sometimes I'm in the car that gets hit. Sometimes I'm just watching, but it always ends the same way. This is crazy. You need help. Professional help. I'm beyond help. But you're not. You can still leave. Just don't come back to this highway at night. Don't pick up fares that take you this route. Trust me. Greg didn't need to be told twice. He put the car in gear and drove, but not toward the passenger's destination. He drove straight back to downtown, back to where he'd picked up the man. When he pulled up to the house, the passenger got out without a word and walked back inside. Greg sat in his car for a long moment, trying to process what had just happened. Then he opened his Uber app to end the ride and rate the passenger, but there was no ride to end. According to the app, he hadn't picked up anyone. His last completed ride was the hotel drop-off from before. There was no record of a passenger named Michael. No record of the ride at all. But Greg knew it had happened. He'd seen the accident. He'd heard the man's story. The next morning, he looked up accidents on that stretch of highway, and he found it. 3 years prior, a man named Michael Brennan had died in a head-on collision with a semi-truck. The accident report matched what Greg had witnessed. Same location, same circumstances. Greg quit driving for Uber that day, deleted the app, turned in his vehicle inspection paperwork, the whole 9 yards. He told me the story last Thanksgiving after he'd had a few drinks and needed to tell someone. I don't know if I really picked up a ghost. Maybe I fell asleep at the wheel and dreamed the whole thing. Maybe I had some kind of stress-induced hallucination. But I saw that accident. I saw it exactly as Michael described it, exactly 30 seconds after he said it would happen. Have you ever gone back? I asked him, to see if it happens again. Hell no. And I never will. Because if it does happen again, if that accident plays out every night like some kind of recording, then that means Michael was telling the truth. And if he was telling the truth about the accident, he was telling the truth about being dead. Greg moved to a different city 6 months later. He says it's for work, but I think he just wanted to be as far away from that highway as possible. I don't blame him. Because if there's one highway in Kansas City where the same accident happens every night, where a dead man calls an Uber trying to get home, then how many other roads have their own ghosts, their own loops, their own trapped souls trying to find their way? I don't want to know. And I don't think Greg does either.
I'm a state trooper in Nevada, and I've been patrolling the highways in this state for almost 15 years now. Most of my work is routine. Speeding tickets, DUIs, helping stranded motorists, the occasional drug bust. But every once in a while, you get a call that reminds you that there's a lot of empty space in Nevada, and not all of it follows the rules. This happened in the summer of 2018 on Highway 375. If you're not familiar with it, Highway 375 is better known as the extraterrestrial highway because it runs close to Area 51. It's a lonely stretch of road mostly used by conspiracy theorists and tourists looking for alien-related attractions. I got a call around 11 p.m. from dispatch. A motorist had called 911 saying they'd seen what looked like a body on the side of the road, about 20 miles outside of Rachel, Nevada. I was the closest unit, so I responded. It took me about 15 minutes to reach the location the caller had described. Sure enough, there was someone lying on the shoulder of the road, partially illuminated by my headlights. I approached carefully, hand on my weapon, calling out, "State Police, are you okay?" No response. As I got closer, I could see it was a man, probably in his 20s, wearing jeans and a t-shirt. He was lying face down, arms splayed out. I knelt down and checked for a pulse. Nothing. No breath, no heartbeat. He was cold, but not stiff yet, which meant he'd died recently. There were no visible injuries, no blood, no signs of trauma. It looked like he'd just collapsed. I radioed for an ambulance and started checking the area for any clues about what had happened. His wallet was in his pocket. ID said his name was Jason Cortez, 24 years old, from Las Vegas. There was no car nearby, no skid marks, no debris, nothing to indicate how he'd gotten here or what had killed him. While I was waiting for the ambulance, I noticed something odd. About 20 feet from the body, there was a pattern in the dirt, circular, maybe 10 feet in diameter, like something heavy and round had been sitting there. And in the center of the circle, the ground was scorched. Not burned like a campfire, scorched, like it had been exposed to intense heat, but only in that one specific spot. I took photos and marked the area with cones. The ambulance arrived, and the EMTs confirmed what I already knew. The kid was dead. They loaded him up and took him to the morgue for an autopsy. I stayed at the scene for another hour, documenting everything, trying to piece together what had happened. That's when I saw the lights. Strange lights moving in the sky. Not airplane lights or satellites. These were different. They moved erratically, changing direction in ways that defied physics. One moment moving left, the next shooting straight up, then hovering in place. I'm not saying it was aliens. I'm really not, but I couldn't explain what I was seeing. The lights moved closer, and I could see they were some kind of craft. Multiple objects, glowing with a pale blue light, absolutely silent. They hovered over the spot where I found the body, and I swear to God, the scorched circle started to glow, the same pale blue color as the lights in the sky. I got in my patrol car. I wasn't sticking around to see what happened next. As I drove away, I watched in my rearview mirror as the lights descended toward the highway, toward that glowing circle. Then, just as suddenly as they appeared, they were gone. The lights vanished, and the highway was dark again. I didn't report the lights. I filed my report about the body, about the scorched earth, but I left out the part about what I'd seen in the sky. The autopsy came back inconclusive. Jason Cortez had no drugs in his system, no signs of disease, no injuries. Cause of death? Unknown. It was like his body had just stopped working. A few weeks later, I ran into an older trooper at the station, a guy named Daniels, who'd been patrolling Nevada highways for 30 years. I told him about the case, about the body and the scorched earth and the lights. He didn't look surprised. He said, "Highway 375, you're not the first, won't be the last." "What do you mean?" He went pale and looked away. "We find bodies out there sometimes. No explanation, no cause of death. Always the same thing. Young men, alone, found on the side of the road with no visible cause of death. And there's always scorched earth nearby. Always." "What do you think is happening?" Daniel shrugged. "I try not to think about it. We patrol the highways. We help people. We enforce the law. What happens out there in the desert, in the empty spaces between the towns, that's not our jurisdiction. That's something else." He walked away, and I never brought it up with him again. I still patrol Highway 375. I still respond to calls out there. But I don't stop unless I have to. And when I drive that stretch at night, I keep my eyes on the road, not on the sky. Because I don't want to see those lights again. I don't want to know what they are or where they come from. And I definitely don't want to end up like Jason Cortez, lying on the side of the road with no explanation, no injuries, just empty.
My mom used to tell me this story when I was growing up, though I never knew if I believed her until I experienced something similar myself, years later. In 1987, when my mom was 23 years old, she was driving home from college for Christmas break. She was attending school in North Carolina and driving back to her parents' house in Virginia, a trip that normally took about 4 hours. She left around 6 p.m., planning to arrive by 10. The first couple hours of the drive were uneventful. She stopped for gas once, grabbed a coffee, and got back on the road. But somewhere around hour 3, she realized she hadn't seen an exit in a very long time. No rest stops, no towns, no mile markers. Just endless highway stretching ahead of her, her headlights cutting through the darkness. She started to panic. Had she missed her exit? Gotten on the wrong highway somehow? She tried to pull off at the next exit, but every time she thought she saw an exit sign, it would disappear as she got closer, like it was never really there to begin with. Her gas gauge was dropping. She'd filled up less than 2 hours ago, but now she was down to half a tank. That didn't make sense. Her car got good mileage. She should have been able to drive for hours on a full tank. Then she saw the other cars. There were maybe a dozen of them, all driving in the same direction, all maintaining the exact same speed. She tried to speed up to pass one, but her car wouldn't accelerate. She tried to slow down to let them pass, but her speedometer stayed locked at exactly 65 miles per hour. She was trapped in this procession of vehicles, unable to speed up, slow down, or exit the highway. The really terrifying part, she said, was when she looked at the other drivers. They were all facing forward, hands on the wheel, completely motionless. Not moving, not blinking, just staring ahead with blank expressions. My mom tried honking her horn, flashing her lights, anything to get someone's attention. But none of the other drivers reacted. They just kept driving, locked at 65 miles per hour, going nowhere. This went on for what felt like hours. My mom said she was crying, screaming, pounding on the steering wheel, but nothing changed. Just the endless highway, the silent cars, the motionless drivers. And then, suddenly, it was over. She saw lights ahead, real lights from a real town. An exit sign appeared, solid and permanent, and her car responded when she tried to take it.
She pulled off the highway and into a gas station, her whole body shaking. When she asked the attendant where she was, he told her she was just outside of Richmond, Virginia, less than an hour from her parents' house. She checked the time. It was 10:17 p.m. She'd been driving for just over 4 hours, the exact amount of time the trip should have taken. But she'd experienced at least 6 or 7 hours of that strange, endless highway. My mom finished her drive home and never spoke about what happened. She convinced herself it had been some kind of exhaustion-induced hallucination, until it happened to me.
In 2015, I was driving from Atlanta to Charlotte for work. Similar route to the one my mom had taken. Similar time of day. About 3 hours into the drive, as the sun was setting, I realized I hadn't seen an exit in a long time, and I was surrounded by other cars, all driving at exactly the same speed. And when I looked at the drivers, they were all facing forward, hands on the wheel, completely motionless. My heart started racing. I remembered my mom's story, the one I'd half dismissed as an embellishment or a dream. I tried my phone. No signal. I tried the radio. Nothing but static. I was trapped, just like my mom had been, in this procession of cars going nowhere. But I did something my mom hadn't done. I looked more closely at the other vehicles. They were all older models. Cars from the 70s, 80s, 90s. Not the kind you'd see in a nostalgic car show, but regular cars that people would have driven decades ago. And the drivers weren't just motionless. They were transparent. I could see through them, see the seats behind them, like they weren't entirely there. I was driving in a procession of ghosts. I don't know how long I drove like that. It felt like forever. But eventually, just like my mom's experience, I saw lights ahead, a real exit, and my car responded when I tried to take it. I pulled into a rest stop and sat in the parking lot until my hand stopped shaking. When I finally worked up the nerve to continue driving, I made it to Charlotte without incident. But now I know my mom wasn't hallucinating. She wasn't making it up or embellishing. There's a stretch of highway between North Carolina and Virginia where something very strange happens, where drivers can find themselves caught in a procession of vehicles that aren't entirely real, driving toward destinations they'll never reach. I've done some research since then, trying to find explanations or similar experiences, and I've found scattered reports, mostly on paranormal forums and Reddit threads, of people experiencing the same thing. Always on highways in the southeast, always at dusk or after dark. Always the same details: the inability to exit, the locked speed, the other vehicles with their motionless drivers. One theory I've read suggests these are echo highways, residual hauntings of accidents or disasters that claimed multiple lives. The drivers we see are the victims, trapped in an endless loop, forever trying to reach destinations they died before reaching. Another theory, more disturbing, suggests these are glimpses into parallel dimensions, places where those drivers are still alive but trapped, driving forever on highways that exist between worlds. I don't know which explanation I believe. Maybe neither. Maybe both. But what I do know is that I avoid that route now. I take a different highway, even though it adds an extra hour to my drive. And I never, ever drive at dusk. My mom is 61 now. She still won't talk about what happened to her that night in 1987. When I tried to tell her about my experience, she just shook her head and said, "I don't want to know. I spent 30 years convincing myself it wasn't real. Don't take that away from me." So, I haven't brought it up again. But sometimes, late at night, she'll call me just to make sure I'm home safe. And I know what she's really asking. She's asking if I stayed off that highway, if I avoided that stretch of road where reality breaks down and the bed keep driving. And I always tell her yes. Because the thought of ending up like those drivers, trapped forever in that procession, driving nowhere at exactly 65 miles per hour with empty eyes and no hope of escape, is more terrifying than anything I can imagine.
This story was told to me by a former ambulance driver named Marcus. He worked emergency medical services in rural Montana for 8 years before transferring to a desk job in Billings. He doesn't like talking about why he left field work, but after a few beers one night, he told me this story. It was a Friday night in November, around 11 p.m. Marcus and his partner, a woman named Stephanie, were coming back from a call in a small town about 40 miles outside of Billings. The call had been a false alarm, chest pains that turned out to be indigestion, but they'd still made the drive. They were heading back on Highway 87, a 2-lane road that cuts through some pretty desolate country. No streetlights, no buildings, just flat land and the occasional ranch miles off the road. Marcus was driving, and Stephanie was in the passenger seat filling out paperwork. That's when they saw the hitchhiker. He was standing on the side of the road, thumb out, wearing what looked like military fatigues. As they got closer, Marcus could see the guy was young, probably early 20s, with a crew cut and a duffel bag at his feet. "Should we stop?" Stephanie asked. "We're not supposed to pick up hitchhikers," Marcus said, but he was already slowing down. "There's an unwritten rule in EMS. If you see someone who might need help, you stop, even if it's outside your normal call protocol. This kid looked cold, looked stranded, and it was going to got below freezing that night." Marcus pulled over and the hitchhiker jogged up to the passenger window. Up close, he looked even younger, baby-faced, nervous. "Hey man, thanks for stopping. I'm trying to get to Fort Harrison. My leave ended yesterday, and I'm going to be in deep shit if I don't get back soon." Fort Harrison was a military base, about an hour north of where they were. "We can give you a lift part way. We're heading back to Billings, which is on the way." "That would be amazing. Thank you so much." The kid climbed in the back of the ambulance and they continued driving. For the first 10 minutes, the conversation was normal. The kid said his name was Danny, that he'd been home visiting his parents, that he was nervous about being late getting back to base. Then Danny asked, "What year is it?" Marcus and Stephanie exchanged a glance. "What?" Stephanie said. "What year is it? I've been gone for a while. I just want to make sure." "It's 2016, Marcus said slowly. Danny was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Oh, you okay back there?" Stephanie asked. Yeah, I thought it was earlier. I thought it was..." He trailed off. Marcus checked the rearview mirror. Danny was staring out the window, his face pale. "You thought it was what year?" Marcus asked. 1971. The ambulance swerved slightly as Marcus processed that. "What are you talking about?" "I died in 1971. Vietnam. I was 19. I was supposed to go home on leave, but I never made it. We got ambushed. I took a round to the chest. I remember bleeding out in the jungle, remember thinking about my mom, how she'd be waiting for me at the airport." Stephanie had turned in her seat to look at Danny. "This isn't funny." "I'm not trying to be funny. I'm trying to understand what's happening. I thought I'd finally made it home. I thought I was on leave, heading back to base. But if it's 2016, how long have I been trying to get home?" Marcus pulled the ambulance over to the side of the road and turned on the interior lights. Danny looked real, solid, not transparent or ghostly or any of the things you'd expect from a spirit. He looked like a regular kid in a military uniform. Let me see your dog tags.
Danny reached under his shirt and pulled out a chain with 2 metal tags. Marcus took them and read the information stamped into the metal. Daniel Robertson, Private First Class, U.S. Army. Blood type, O positive. And a date of birth that would make Danny about 70 years old if he were still alive. "This is insane," Stephanie whispered. Marcus handed the tags back. "Danny, I don't know what's going on here, but—" "Can you take me to Fort Harrison?" Danny interrupted. "Please, I just need to report back. I need to finish my service. I can't keep trying to get home. I've been trying for so long." There was something in his voice, a desperation that made Marcus's chest tighten. "Okay," Marcus said. "We'll take you." They drove in silence. Danny sat in the back, staring out the window at the dark landscape passing by. As they got closer to where Fort Harrison should be, Danny started to look agitated. "It looks different. Everything looks different." "A lot has changed since 1971, Stephanie said gently. "I don't understand what's happening. Why am I here? Why now?" None of them had an answer. When they reached the gates of Fort Harrison, Danny asked them to stop. "I can walk from here." "Are you sure?" Marcus asked. "Yeah, thank you for the ride. Thank you for—" He paused, searching for words. "Thank you for treating me like I was real." "You are real," Stephanie said. Danny smiled sadly. "I don't think so, but I appreciate you saying it." He got out of the ambulance, grabbed his duffel bag, and started walking toward the base gates. Marcus and Stephanie watched him go. They saw him approach the gate, saw him walk through it, and then he was gone. Not like he walked out of sight. Gone. Like he'd simply ceased to exist. Marcus drove them back to the station in silence. They filed their report, leaving out the part about the hitchhiker who claimed to have died in Vietnam. The next day, Marcus did some research. He found a Daniel Robertson who died in Vietnam in 1971, killed in an ambush at age 19. A soldier who'd been scheduled to go home on leave but never made it. According to military records, his body was recovered and sent home to Montana for burial. His grave was in a cemetery just outside of Billings. Marcus visited the grave. There was a headstone with Danny's name, his dates of birth and death, and an inscription that read, "Gone but not forgotten, still waiting to come home." Marcus quit fieldwork 6 months later. He said he couldn't shake the feeling that every hitchhiker, every stranded motorist, might be another lost soul trying to finish a journey they never completed. He said he started seeing them everywhere. People on the sides of roads who disappeared when he got close, figures in his rearview mirror who vanished when he looked back. "There are so many of them," he told me that night. "So many people who died before they made it home, before they finished whatever they were trying to do. And some of them are still out there, still trying, still hitchhiking on highways, still waiting for someone to stop, still hoping that this time they'll make it." "Do you think you really picked up a ghost?" I asked. "I don't know what we picked up, but his dog tags were real. I held them in my hands, and when I looked up his records, everything matched. His name, his rank, his date of death, all of it. So what do you think happened?" Marcus finished his beer and set it down. "I think Danny Robertson has been trying to get home for 45 years. And I think he's still trying. I think there are hundreds, maybe thousands of people like him, caught in loops, replaying their last journeys over and over, hoping that eventually they'll reach their destinations. That's horrifying." "Yeah, it is. That's why I don't drive those highways anymore. That's why I took a desk job, because I can't handle picking up another passenger who's already dead, who doesn't even know they're dead, who just wants to go home." I think about that story sometimes when I'm driving late at night and I see someone on the side of the road. I think about Danny Robertson, still trying to get back to base, still trying to complete his service, still not understanding that he's been dead for decades. And I wonder how many others are out there, standing on the shoulders of America's highways, thumbs out, hoping for a ride that will finally take them home.
I'm a traveling salesman. I know, it's a dying profession, but some industries still prefer face-to-face meetings, and I spend a lot of time on the road. I've driven through 43 states, logged over 300,000 miles, and I thought I'd seen everything. I was wrong. Last October, I was driving through West Virginia on Route 119, heading from Charleston to Beckley for a meeting. It was around 8 p.m., dark and foggy, the kind of weather that makes driving stressful even on familiar roads. I'd driven this route dozens of times before, but that night, something was different. The fog was thicker than usual, reducing visibility to maybe 50 feet. I slowed down, turned on my high beams, which only made the fog worse, and tried to focus on the road. That's when I saw the sign. It was one of those old-fashioned road signs, the kind you'd see in old photographs from the 1950s or 60s. Wooden, hand-painted, with an arrow pointing to the right. Motel, 2 miles. I didn't remember seeing a motel on this stretch of road before, but I'd been driving for 6 hours and I was exhausted. A motel sounded perfect. I followed the arrow, turning onto a side road that I was certain hadn't been there on my previous trips. The road was narrow, unpaved, winding through dense forest. My GPS showed nothing but blank space. No road, no motel, nothing. But I kept driving. I was tired enough that I wasn't thinking clearly, wasn't questioning why I was following a hand-painted sign into the middle of nowhere. After about 2 miles, just like the sign promised, I saw lights. A motel, small and old-fashioned, with a flickering neon sign that read, "Rest Well." There were about a dozen rooms, all in a single-story building arranged in an L shape. Only one other car was parked in the lot, a sedan that looked like it was from the 1980s. I parked and went into the office. Behind the counter was a man who looked to be in his 70s, wearing a cardigan and reading glasses, watching a black and white TV that looked like an old Western. "Need a room?" he asked without looking up. "Yes, please, just for the night." $40. I pulled out my wallet and handed him 2 20s. He gave me a key, an actual key, not a key card, attached to a plastic diamond with the number 7 stamped on it. "Room's around the corner. Checkout's at 10 a.m. I took the key and went back to my car. As I was grabbing my overnight bag, I noticed that the other car in the lot had a thick layer of dust on it. Not a light coating, but thick, like it had been sitting there for months. Room 7 was at the end of the building. I unlocked it and stepped inside. The room was clean, but dated. Floral wallpaper, a rotary phone on the nightstand, a TV with dials instead of a remote. It looked like it had been decorated in the 1970s and never updated. But I was too tired to care. I took a shower, set an alarm on my phone, and collapsed into bed. I woke up to the sound of voices. Multiple voices coming from outside my room. I checked my phone. 3:47 a.m.
I went to the window and pulled back the curtain. The parking lot was full. At least 20 cars, all older models from different decades. And standing outside their rooms were people, dozens of them, all wearing clothing from different eras. A woman in a dress from the 1950s. A man in bell-bottoms and a tie-dye shirt from the 1970s. A couple in 80s workout gear. And they were all having conversations, laughing, socializing. like it was the middle of the day instead of 3:47 a.m. But something was wrong with the way they moved. Their gestures were jerky, unnatural, like old film footage played at the wrong speed. And when they spoke, their voices didn't match their lip movements. The sound was delayed, echoing, like I was hearing them from underwater. I backed away from the window, my heart pounding. This wasn't right. None of this was right. I grabbed my bag, my keys, and headed for the door. I didn't care about getting a refund. I just wanted to leave. But when I opened the door, they were all staring at me. Every single person in that parking lot had turned to face my room, and they were all staring with expressions I can only describe as hungry. One of them, the woman in the 50s dress, started walking toward me. Then another. Then all of them moving in that jerky, wrong way, converging on my room. I slammed the door and locked it. The doorknob rattled as someone tried to open it. I looked around frantically for another exit. There was a window in the bathroom, small but big enough to squeeze through. I ran to the bathroom, climbed onto the toilet, and forced the window open. I shoved my bag through first, then pulled myself up and squeezed through the opening. I dropped onto the ground behind the motel and ran to my car. The people were still gathered at my door, jiggling the handle, knocking, calling out in those echoing underwater voices. I got in my car, started the engine, and floored it. As I drove away, I looked in my rearview mirror. The motel was gone. Just dark forest where the building had been seconds before. I drove straight through to Beckley. Didn't stop until I was in a well-lit parking lot of a 24-hour McDonald's. When the sun came up, I tried to find that side road again, the one I'd turned onto. I drove up and down Route 119 3 times, but I couldn't find it. There was no turnoff, no wooden sign, no road leading into the forest. It was like it had never existed. I checked my wallet. The $40 I'd paid for the room were still there. The transaction had never happened, but I still have the key. Room 7, Rest Well Motel. Plastic diamond attached to a brass key. It's sitting on my desk right now as I type this. Physical proof that I was somewhere, that I stayed in a motel that doesn't exist, that I encountered people who shouldn't be alive. I've looked online for any information about a Rest Well Motel in West Virginia. Nothing. I've asked locals if they've ever heard of it. They haven't. It's like that place exists outside of normal reality. A pocket dimension that opens up on certain highways at certain times, luring in tired drivers who just want a place to rest. And I think about those people in the parking lot, wearing clothes from different decades, moving in that wrong way, staring at me with hungry expressions. I think they were travelers like me, people who stopped at the Rest Well Motel and never left. People who became part of whatever that place is, trapped forever in a loop, acting out the motions of life without actually living. I don't drive Route 119 anymore. I take a different route to Beckley, even though it adds time to my trip. And I never, ever follow hand-painted signs that point to motels I don't remember seeing before. Because I know now that there are places on America's highways that exist in the spaces between reality. Places that look normal, that seem safe, but that trap the unwary and add them to their eternal collections of lost travelers. The key sits on my desk as a reminder that not all roads lead where they're supposed to, and not all motels want you to check out.